Coming up on Arirang News, more than 20 people who've gotten flu shots in South Korea have died shortly thereafter, raising concerns about the vaccine. But the health authorities say there is no evidence of a link and the vaccines will continue. South Korea reports more than 100 new cases of COVID-19, the first time that's happened in a week. Most of these cases linked to hospitals and a nursing home. And analysts are forecasting profits at Korea's listed companies to be up for the third quarter compared to last year. Strength at the big tech companies outweighing losses in sectors hit by the pandemic. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. At least 22 people have died in South Korea in the past week after getting their seasonal flu shots. Health authorities are investigating, but so far they say no link has been found between the vaccine and the deaths, and the vaccination program will continue. Han Sang-woo reports.
The head of the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency, Chung Eun-kyung, at a Thursday hearing in the National Assembly, said that this year's influenza vaccines are not toxic and that there is no link between them and the recent deaths. This comes after growing public concerns as several people across the country who got the vaccine died shortly after. The safety of the vaccine had already been in the spotlight after 500,000 flu shots were recalled last month as they had been stored improperly. There's no confirmed evidence that the deaths were caused by the vaccine, and some of the people who died had underlying health conditions. Anaphylactic shock, a serious allergic reaction that can occur after vaccination, was initially suspected on Wednesday as a possible reason for 2 of the deaths. But after a thorough review, health officials reported that the likelihood is very low. The government will continue to distribute flu vaccines and conduct further epidemiological investigations. Meanwhile, the Korean Medical Association is advising a temporary postponement of vaccinations for a week. South Korea is providing flu shots to the young and to senior citizens free of charge to reduce the burden on hospitals this winter amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Over 8 million people have received free flu shots so far. Han Sang-woo, Arirang News.
South Korea has reported more than 100 new cases of COVID-19, the first time that's happened in a week. These cases are mostly from hospitals, a nursing home, and social gatherings. Min Soo-kyun reports.
South Korea on Thursday reported 121 new COVID-19 cases. According to the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency, 104 cases were domestic infections, the first time locally transmitted cases have gone above 100 since September 24th. The other 17 cases were from overseas. This brings the total number of coronavirus infections across the nation to over 25,500. 3 more deaths were also reported, bringing the death toll to 453. Thursday's figure is the second time the daily figures have exceeded 100 since the country eased its social distancing measures last week. On October 12th, social distancing guidelines were revised to level 1, the lowest level in the 3-tier system, following a downward trend in cases. However, there have still been cluster infections in recent weeks, mainly at nursing homes and long-term care hospitals. As of Thursday, a total of 106 cases are linked to a rehabilitation hospital in Gwangju, Gyeonggi-do Province, while 84 others are tied to a nursing home in Busan. Starting Monday, the country is conducting tests on those related to such risk-prone facilities in the Greater Seoul area to contain the spread of the virus.
On October 19th and 20th, the Seoul Metropolitan Government conducted tests on 2,746 workers at 30 medical facilities in the capital. Among those, only 1 tested positive. Testing and tracing are being carried out at the long-term care hospital in Yeongdeung-Pogu district.
Additional cluster infections are being reported at gatherings as well. So far, 12 people contracted the virus after a family gathering in Bucheon, Gyeonggi-do Province, and at least 18 others in Seoul were reported to have tested positive after a social gathering. Health authorities are advising the public to refrain from such social and family gatherings and to strictly follow the country's social distancing measures. Min Soo-kyun, Arirang News.
Hyundai Engineering says 23 of its South Korean workers at a plant in Poland have tested positive. The company said Wednesday that it had tested all 1,300 workers at the plant after there was a confirmed case there, and that's when the 23 were found. In addition to the Koreans, another 145 other workers also tested positive. Hyundai Engineering says these people are now in isolation according to the local guidelines. A volunteer taking part in a clinical trial of AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine in Brazil has died, but the country's health authorities say the trial is going to continue. Oxford University, which is a partner in the vaccine's development, has confirmed that it would keep testing and that it has no concerns about the safety of the trial. It's not clear whether the person received the vaccine or the placebo, but Reuters cites a source familiar with the matter as saying that if it had been the real vaccine, then the trial would have been halted. So far, 8,000 of a planned 10,000 volunteers have been recruited and given the first dose, and some have received a second. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says a declaration to formally end the Korean War would obviously be part of efforts to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. At a press briefing Wednesday, Pompeo stressed there has been no change in Washington's stance on the need for such a declaration. His remarks come a matter of weeks after President Moon Jae-in called for international support to formally end the war in a speech to the UN General Assembly. The two Koreas are technically still at war since the conflict from 1950 to 53 ended with an armistice, not a peace treaty. Some major companies in South Korea are seeing better than expected earnings this year for the third quarter. In fact, operating profits at major companies listed on the KOSPI are forecast to be quite a bit higher than they were a year ago. Our Kim Jae-hee has the details.
Major KOSPI-listed companies are forecast to see an increase in operating profit in the third quarter this year, despite the COVID-19 pandemic. According to financial information provider FN Guide, the combined third quarter operating profit of 173 KOSPI-listed companies was expected to reach some $33 billion as of Wednesday. This is more than 24% higher than last year's third quarter operating profit. Some companies have already announced better than expected third quarter earnings. Samsung Electronics' estimated third quarter operating profit jumped more than 58% from the same period last year, totaling to some $10.8 billion. And LG Chem saw its operating profit for the third quarter reach about $795 million, an increase of almost 160% from the same period last year. Overall, companies in the IT, gaming, and securities industries had a bright forecast with growth in operating profits. One analyst explained that these types of companies with high market capitalization are recovering, leading to a rise in estimated operating profits of KOSPI-listed companies overall.
Since March and April, major economies have resumed economic activities, and economic measures to overcome COVID-19, such as large-scale stimulus policies and quantitative easing, have helped major companies recover. Costs have also been reduced, contributing to the rise in operating profit.
But the analysts stressed that the strong operating profit forecast does not mean all companies are on the road to recovery. Those in the aviation and tourism industries are still suffering from a massive slump after they were particularly badly hit by the pandemic. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Kim Se-won, professor of economics at Ewha Women's University. Professor Kim, good afternoon and thanks for coming on.
Good afternoon, Devin.
Well, the U.S. dollar index continues to fall. Yesterday, the Korean won against the dollar fell to its lowest in 1 year and 7 months. It's now around 11.33. Tell us what's happening with the exchange rate.
After $1 exchange rate had its peak in March, right after the outbreak of COVID pandemic, the big trend in exchange rate became a stronger one and declining $1 exchange rate. But in today's foreign exchange market, there was an increase of $1 exchange rate due to demands for U.S. dollar at lower price than before. Also, the possibility on Chinese government's foreign exchange market intervention for weakening Chinese yuan also temporarily raised the $1 exchange rate for today.
Right, the yuan has been a factor here, but the exchange rate could very well keep falling. What do you say, Professor, and what impact would a lower rate have on the Korean economy?
Stronger one adds to worsening conditions faced by Korean exporters. It is very important to recover export of nation because it is a main driver of Korean economic growth. Strong one weakens Korean export price competitiveness against Japan and emerging markets, countries in particular. But Korean won is expected to appreciate against U.S. dollars as Chinese yuan appreciates due to its rapid economic growth recently.
Well, turning to the stock market, Wall Street was up and down on Wednesday as investors followed the news about a potential stimulus deal in the U.S. The three main indices were all down, though, in the end. What's the story in the global markets?
Most investors have recently focused on any developments in Washington over a possible stimulus package. U.S. stock closed lower Wednesday as negotiations over a fresh stimulus bill continued. Dow Jones Industrial dropped by 0.3% and NASDAQ also dropped by 0.3% on Wednesday. All European markets in London, Paris, and Frankfurt also dropped over 1% on Wednesday.
Right, and today, Korean shares quite a bit lower as well, especially in the KOSDAQ, selling by foreign investors and institutions. Retail investors still buying, though. What was driving that trade today?
Today's domestic market is pretty much affected by U.S. market and European market of yesterday. Domestic market went down today with KOSPI's negative 0.6% and KOSPI's negative 2.2%. As uncertainties in major markets increased, foreign investors and domestic institutional investors have led market by selling stocks.
Yeah, and a bit more on the foreign currency issues. According to the Bank of Korea, foreign currency deposits locally declined in September by more than $3 billion. They had been rising to new highs for 3 months in a row, in part because of people investing in overseas stocks. So why have deposits declined now?
After the outbreak of pandemic, there has been consistent increase of foreign currency deposit due to uncertainties in global economy and domestic residents, foreign stock investments. But according to Bank of Korea, Korean residents' foreign currency deposit decreased in September by about $3.1 billion US dollars. But if we take a look at inside, we have totally opposite movements between households and corporations. Corporations' foreign currency deposit decreased in a large scale related to settlements of foreign payment and domestic stock brokerage firms' deposits on foreign country accounts. But households' foreign currency deposit increased by about $400 million in September.
Got it. All right, Professor Kim, we'll have to leave it there for today and speak again next week. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Now, NASA has successfully landed a spacecraft on an asteroid. Just briefly, though, on a mission to collect samples of rock and dust. It seems it succeeded. Now it's going to bring whatever it managed to pick up back to Earth for analysis, which could yield insights into the origins of the solar system. Choi Min-jung reports.
NASA made history Tuesday by succeeding in its first ever attempt to collect samples from an asteroid. The asteroid, that NASA calls Bennu, is more than 321 million kilometers from Earth. According to NASA, its team confirmed the touchdown occurred on Tuesday evening, East Coast time.
It's just scientifically really exciting. It's the first time that we've, been to the surface, we tried to touch the surface of another solar system object. The first time that NASA has tried to do that in order to bring back the sample, in a really long time. And the first time that NASA has tried to do it on an asteroid.
NASA's minivan-sized spacecraft collected rocks from the asteroid by performing a 5-second touch-and-go technique. After departing from the orbit and making a 4-hour-long descent toward the asteroid, the spacecraft extended its 3-meter-long arms and trapped samples after shooting a burst of nitrogen gas. The collection of samples happened within just 5 seconds after touchdown. Scientists say the samples could provide important clues to explaining the origins of life, as it existed even before Earth was formed. NASA's mission to Bennu started in 2016 after the spacecraft was launched from the Kennedy Space Center. The spacecraft is set to return to Earth in 2023. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
That brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.